Yeah, cool. So we're going to carry on our journey within Ben and Roz Zander's The Art of Possibility. Practice number 1 is about giving people an A. It's about seeing things in people that maybe they haven't themselves seen. And it's just such an honoring practice when we notice what's possible for other people. Practice 2 was about being a contribution. And Dave, you just so beautifully said yesterday around how sometimes we're consumers rather than contributors.
Yeah.
Practice number 3 goes a little bit onto leadership, although it's not aimed just at people in positional leadership, but it's this thought of, can you lead from any chair? And I love Ben Zander's example. So for those of you who don't know Ben Zander, he's maestro of the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra, and he's done some incredible talks and written these books which relate to music. But he talks about this moment in his life where he's looking at all their CDs that they've created, and all the covers show him. And he says, how interesting or how fascinating that on this particular day, he thinks to himself, I'm the only one who doesn't make a sound. And yet I'm the face of the orchestra. And it was this beautiful realization that the conductor's chair is a chair that he needs to lead from, but not leading from a place of what's in this for me, but leading from a place of what's in this for other people. And if I make them great, they make me great. Mm-hmm. So it's a very sort of interesting lesson around leadership. Mm-hmm. And I suppose the intent of leadership and the fact that we can lead from any chair. So I've said enough. Mr. Betts, what are your thoughts, commentary on what's just been said?
Hello, Mikey. Yeah, I love that story. The fact that without him, the orchestra, could go off key or off timing, but actually his contribution is heard through the lens of everyone else. I love that. And often it's the best contributions are often things that we bring, but people don't hear or see it through us. They hear and see it through other people. Like giving an idea to somebody and then hearing a month later that he's actually gone and run ahead with that idea and it's impacted many people's lives. You are the secret, unheard, unseen person who actually was the catalyst for that thing to start, right? Jesus tells a story, don't let your right hand know what your left hand's doing. And when you give in secret. And it's that whole thing of contributions don't have to be public. They don't have to be seen by everyone to have effect. In fact, some of the best contributions are the ones that are done unanimously or without people understanding or seeing. And I love that picture. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. I suppose it sort of takes us to the motivation of leadership. And is leadership about the self-gratification of the leader, or is leadership about making other people everything that they can be?
That's beautiful.
And I suppose you've got to be honest, it can be quite difficult, the example that you've given, Dave, where it is your idea and then somebody takes it. It's probably sometimes difficult to not feel a sense of needing acknowledgement. It is one of the presidents of the United States, I think it might have been Wilson or one of them, I can't quite remember exactly who, but he has a beautiful quote where he says, we could achieve so much in life if we weren't worried about who got the credit.
That is so true. That is so true. Yeah.
It's beautiful, but it's tough. It is tough.
But it's back to the good old fashioned ego again. I think if your ego is in check, and we must do a series on the ego, I think, but if your ego is in check, then suddenly the world opens up. You don't mind contributing because you don't really need the credit. I often find actually older people, like us, I find I can contribute a lot better now because I'm not half as concerned about whether I get it right or wrong. I don't really care, but I don't really care who gets the glory either. And all that's done is it makes you want to contribute, more and more. Covey has something to say about this. My good friend Covey, of course, he talks about leading through the compass. So most people, when you talk about leadership, they think north to south leadership. You know, you are leading people who are below you or beneath you in the tree, as it were. But Covey says that no, a good leader is confident in leading south north, so leading up, and that's influencing, of course. That kind of leadership is the one of, can I influence those who are in a higher position of authority or accountability or responsibility than I am? And that's the issue of contribution. I want to make my contribution known to you, but I know that at best all I can do is influence you. I have no authority over what you do. And then, of course, there's the peer relationship. How do we contribute in a way that affects our peers? Which is, again, that form of leadership, leading from all position of the compass. I think that is worth some thinking through. What's your thoughts on that?
No, yes, I think it's great. So I think, unfortunately, we've often been taught leadership around a title. Whereas, so if leadership is around a title, then it's very, very hard to lead upwards. So that would be Covey's north.
Yeah.
Because that's a person with a position of power. But leadership doesn't need to have the title. There's, Robin Sharma's got the book, The Leader Who Has No Title.
Yes, I love that book.
Where he tries to stress that point. So it's a very mature thought, which says wherever you are in the so-called pecking order, remember that's invented.
Yeah.
Which is a big word of the Xanders. It's actually invented, and you don't need to have the title to actually assume leadership, and especially leadership from a place of contribution. It's quite interesting. COVID-19 might have challenged many leaders, because leadership could relate to physically sitting in a chair in a big office space.
Yes.
I don't know if you can remember, Dave, years and years ago, we definitely won't mention names, but we went to a particular firm, and when we walked into the boardroom, we were quickly told by about 10 or so very, very adult males who are very, very professional that we were not allowed to sit in that chair.
Yes, that's that person's chair.
That's that person's chair. And it took me a little bit aback, because we were talking what I considered a relatively progressive company. And yet here was this boardroom where that was that guy's chair, the main guy's chair. And basically, if he walked in and somebody was in that chair,
I just wanted to sit there just to see what he was going to do. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's positional leadership, which is the very smallest, if you even can call it leadership.
Yes.
What we're talking about is leadership. That comes out of who we are, not what we've been called or told.
Yeah, it's leadership that contributes to the well-being and the others fulfilling who and what they can be. Collins, I think, gives quite a nice explanation, and the mirror and the window. Where he talks about some leaders, when things are going well, they go to the window and they say, look how my people have done, versus the guy who goes to the window when things are bad and he says it's their fault.
Yes.
The mirror, the good leader or the great leader, when things are going bad, looks in the mirror and says, I wonder what it is I need to do differently.
Yes.
Versus when things are going well, the other type of leader says, look what it is that I'm doing. And I think that's quite a nice example of probably leading from any seat, where it's about what needs to happen versus, what am I getting? And again, as I say this, I realize that this isn't necessarily an easy thing to do. We do have ego. Like you say, we must actually do something on ego, because to keep the ego in check can sometimes be quite difficult. But think of how much the leader accomplishes when he says, my role is to make the cellist, the violinist,
it's to bring out the flute player. No one can hear the flute player unless everyone else is turned down and the spotlight, allowing the spotlight to fall on someone, or giving someone a space in the orchestra to play. I think there's so many similes we can talk through that. Um,
Yeah.
and I think it is that mature position. A leader is one that wants to bring out the best in the others around them and the best of what they're trying to achieve. Um,
Mm.
and a leader carries intrinsic leadership. It's not bestowed on them. It's intrinsically coming from who they are.
Yeah.
I love that.
Okay, so let me ask you a difficult question. So you're sitting in the UK right now, whereas a year ago you were sitting in South Africa, where many people would have looked up to you, been directed by you, because you had a team, you had a sense of huge, huge credibility. And not that you don't have that credibility anymore, but now you're almost a one-man, two-man sort of band in
Yeah.
the UK. Has that been difficult? Does that impact your sense of leader?
Yeah. Wow. So yes, hugely. I've been through this cycle a few times where I've led a team and I've been in the midst of the team, and I have to say I really love that space. When the guys are around you and there's buzz, and then I've left that team and gone and started a business again, and it's just me and the wife and maybe one other, and I find myself exactly back in that position. So I'm still involved in leading the South African team, but now I've got to do it from a distance, and I'm not doing it from a positional. I'm doing it have to do it from a place of influence. And it isn't an easy place to do it. I've got to say, it's a lot easier to be able to walk in and just say, point and do. And now you have to influence and you have to take time over it. I realize actually when you remotely lead, everything must take a lot longer than it does when you're in presence. And if anyone's listening to this and they are moving into a more remote position, prepare yourself, because everything needs to take that much longer, because the relationships are now on through a distance. But I think the biggest check, Mike, the biggest thing I struggle with is yourself. Every morning I get up, I go to the very next room and I sit down here, and this is my job. My commute is 4 steps from the bedroom to this bedroom. And you've got to keep building, and saying, what contribution can I make to the bigger, wider community out there where I'm not seeing people face to face? So maybe we should unpack this one sometime. Yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose the insight is you might need to do things differently, but it doesn't alter who and what you are and the impact that you can have on people and individuals.
Yeah. Right.
And I think that's the maturity in leadership where you don't need the title, you don't need the desk, you don't need the chair. Different location, different space, but you're still playing this role of making a huge contribution to people.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. And I think I'm handling it a lot better now than I have done in the past. I remember my first transition like this was when I was in my late 20s, leading a team to my own again. And I found that really hard, because still, the ego needs people to be praising you all the time, and you don't get that when you work remotely. So yes. Learning to contribute around the compass, as it were, is certainly essential.
Yeah. Okay. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed this one. It's certainly something worth unpacking and diving into. I suppose what's the message in a nutshell? We don't necessarily need the titles or the chairs or the accolades to have impact in terms of leadership. It's who you are. It's what you do.
Yes.
And our most powerful expressions of leadership is when it comes from a place of contribution.
Yes.
And making you great. And when you make other people great, guess what? You might appear on the CD covers, and people won't despise that.
Yes. And they never hear you. I love that.
Because,
Great one
nice.
today, Mike.
Nice.
Well done.
Cool. Thanks, Davey.
Till next time.